Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to see we have our normal big crowd here this evening. It has been suggested, because of the number of speaker cards I have, that I cut the speakers down to 1.5 minutes. Welcome to the special meeting of the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council Parking Authority meeting for Tuesday, May 28th, 2013. I would ask the audience to either silence your cell phones or place them on vibrate, and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Joe Przynski?
Here.
Councilmember Marcia Jensen?
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt?
Here.
Vice Mayor Stephen Leonardis?
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. I'm going to be calling a very special person forward to lead us in the flag salute, because this person is the current chair of our Youth Commission. So Ben Baranowski, please come up. Ben is more used to sitting in this chair rather than standing beside it. Ben is a 12th grader at Los Gatos High School. He's been on the Los Gatos Youth Commission for 4 years and chair for 2 of those years, including, as I indicated, this current year. Ben loves technology. He has participated in the Los Gatos High School drama program. He volunteers at the Walden West Summer Camp. He plays guitar, and he will be attending Colorado State University at Fort Collins, Colorado in the fall. Let's give him a round of applause. I'm going to hand the microphone to Ben and ask him to lead us in the flag salute, if you will all stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You go. Thank you. There's that. Enjoy Fort Collins. Another round of applause. Now I'm going to come all the way down here, flip to my second page, and ask Jennifer Calloway to join me. I am presenting to the town, by way of Jennifer, a Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for fiscal year 2012-2013. Jennifer is the Finance and Budget Director who is receiving this award on behalf of the town. To receive this award, the town budget must be rated as proficient in 4 categories designed to assess how well the budget serves as a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communications guide. This is the 16th year in a row that the town of Los Gatos has received this award. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm accepting this on behalf of Mr. Conway. He can't be here tonight. He wanted me to thank particularly the town manager for his leadership direction and the whole budget team for all of the collaborative work that's put into the budget process every year. This is my first year working on the budget, and I can see how collaborative, and it really is a team effort. So he wanted me to thank all of you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Todd. Closed session report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, members of the public. The Council met in closed session this evening as duly noticed on the agenda. They took no action, and there's nothing to report out this evening.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that anyone who wishes to address us this evening, either on a matter that is on our agenda or is not on our agenda, if you'll please submit to the clerk one of these cards. I will note for the record that in addition to our flag salute leader, we have one person in the audience and one card. So we're batting 1,000 thus far. Council manager reports. Council matter. Anybody from the council wish to report? Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to report that I attended the MTC, our Metropolitan Transportation Commission meeting last Wednesday as the representative for the 15 cities and towns of Santa Clara County. And the MTC is dealing with a little issue of bolts on the bridge. The question of whether or not the bolts that are currently in place are going to withstand the potential earthquake in the future, and this will be decided finally tomorrow at a special meeting of the MTC. That's the only meeting I want to report.
Will you be attending that meeting tomorrow?
Yes, I will.
Anyone else? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the good fortune of attending a Memorial Day Veterans celebration yesterday at Oak Hill Cemetery in San Jose with you.
Yes, we did. And this has been quite a week, this past week of meetings for several of us. We had the General Plan Committee meeting, and at that meeting, the areas that were going to be studied for the overlay zone were not only identified, but they were finalized. We received traffic reports on them. We received school attendance on them, and they are now going forward to public hearing. I believe that public hearing has been set, but I'm going to ask the town manager if you can give us the date and location.
We'll actually refer to Sandy Bailey, Director of Community Development, as of June 10th.
It's tentatively scheduled for a hearing in November.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I'm talking about the outreach to the AHAS neighbors.
The neighborhood meeting. Oh, that will be next Tuesday.
And the date next Tuesday is?
Is it 4th, June? June 4th, and that's here in the council chambers from 6:30 to 8:30.
All right, thank you very much. And then also we had the North 40 Advisory Committee also met this past week. It was our first meeting since last August. It was our first opportunity to review the draft North 40 specific plan. We met and considered issues and voted on them for almost 3 hours. We received about a half hour of community input, and we anticipate several meetings in short order. Anybody else? Ms. McNutt.
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, I think you were at the Memorial Day ceremonies at Los Gatos Memorial Park, not at Oak Hill?
Yes, we were.
Thank you.
Ms. Jensen.
If other members of the council wanted to see the draft North 40 report, could they? And where would they see it?
We can make it available to you as either a hard copy or a link. Just let myself or Jeanette know your preference.
And I would suggest that any member of the council that wishes that information to just email the town manager. Anything else on council matter? Oh, I'm sorry, that was council matters. Manager matters.
Yes. Madam Mayor, members of the council, just a few items. First, we are continuing to seek applicants for the Transportation and Parking Commission. The deadline for applications to that commission has been extended to Wednesday, June 5th, and we would encourage Los Gatos Leadership Graduate Service Club representatives or other constituents in communication with the council to consider applying to that important commission that advises the council. I also wanted to do an introduction of our newest captain, Michael D'Antonio, who is here tonight for the budget hearing, along with his colleague, Captain Matt Frisbee. But I'd like to ask Captain D'Antonio to stand up and be recognized by the council. That concludes staff report at this time.
Thank you, and welcome. We now have consent items to be acted upon in a single motion. We have one item on our consent calendar. I have no cards on it, but does any person from the audience wish to pull the item from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, anyone from the council? Seeing no one, may have a motion? Mr. Leonardis.
Move to approve consent calendar.
Second.
Motion, discussion, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Verbal communications. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience who wishes to address us on an item not on our agenda to come forward and speak. I do not have any cards. And seeing no one coming forward, there will be no one speaking on verbal communications. We are now up to public hearings. We have two public hearings. The first one is Agenda Item 2, to adopt the resolution approving the Blossom Hill Park Pathway Improvement Project for fiscal year 2013-14. And I understand that our staff report will be made by Todd Capurso, Parks and Public Works Director. Mr. Capurso.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As many of you know, the local process to allocate CDBG funds has changed over the last 2 fiscal years. And in order to keep up with that change, the CDBG process now requires the approval of a resolution to allocate all current year funding. Historically, we have kind of been chasing the previous year's funding as we allocate the current year's funding, so we've always had project funding to carry over from one year and then reallocate it to the next. And with this proposed resolution and the proposed budget that you'll see tonight, we're hoping to change that and take all of the previous year's funding that was previously allocated to a different project and allocate it toward the Blossom Hill Park Pathway project, along with our allocation for 13 and 14. So that would allow us to then consolidate our funding into a single project. And in order to do so, we need a resolution from council and to hold a public hearing. And that, if there's any additional questions on the project, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does council have questions of Mr. Capurso? I see none. Does anybody wish to address us on this agenda item? I have no cards. I see no one coming forward, so I will close the public hearing portion of this matter and look to council for a discussion or a motion. Ms. Jensen.
I move that we adopt the resolution approving the Blossom Hill Park Pathway Improvement Project for fiscal year 2013-14 as discussed by Mr. Capurso and as contained in our staff report.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Jensen, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. We are now on agenda item number 3, the operating and capital budgets. In this matter, we will be A, to consider the Town of Los Gatos' proposed operating and capital budget for fiscal year 13-14. B, consider the Town of Los Gatos' proposed capital improvement program for fiscal year 13-14. C, 13-18. Provide direction regarding inclusion of the following in the fiscal year 13-14 operating and capital budget. 1, allocation of funding for arts organizations. 2, funding for community resource officer intern pilot program for library. 3, funding for CUP tracking and story pole communications, and then other change or direction. I understand on this one, we will be having a report from both combined by Greg Larson and Jennifer Callaway for the benefit of the audience and the both online and here in chambers. Let me explain what's happened so far. We have had a staff report over the past weekend and today and yesterday. Council members submitted questions to the staff. Staff has answered those in writing, and we have those questions and answers as part of a desk item. So that is additional information that has been provided as part of this agenda item. So, Mr. Capurso, Ms. Callaway, I will turn it over to you.
Actually, I'll be beginning the presentation tonight, and I did want to acknowledge for the council that Director, Finance and Administrative Services Director Steve Conway is gone on bereavement leave for his nephew's passing, and the services are today and tomorrow. So he apologizes for not being present, but we are fortunate to have his staff and finance and budget manager Jennifer Callaway stepping up to present for him, and then Todd Capurso will be presenting the CIP. We also have the directors and other staff available who have worked on the budget to answer any questions that the council may have, including the 2 police captains I introduced earlier, as the police chief has a particularly significant anniversary today that he is unable to join us, and I told him we would call him if the council questions indicated he had to be present, but given the discussion to date and the future leadership role of Captains Frisbee and D'Antonio, it was time for them to get used to the budget process as well. So we will move forward now. You have 6 documents before you. Weeks ago, we provided you with both the operating budget, which included the capital budget for next year, as well as the 5-year capital improvement program. In your agenda packet last Thursday, we provided you a staff report. On Friday, we provided an addendum, which included answers to several council questions, and then there was today's desk item, which answered numerous more. And then you also have a copy of the presentation that does present both summary of the information you've already received, plus some limited new information. I will be doing a quick overview of the budget and then turning it over to Finance and Budget Manager Jennifer Callaway for a more detailed summary of the budget, the 5-year forecast, and a few highlights from each department. Returning to me for some discussion of direction we're seeking from council before Todd Capurso proceeds with the CIP presentation. Budget outlook. The Great Recession of 2008 appears to be moving behind us after 5 years of targeted expenditure reductions and some loss of certain revenues. We are now seeing some stabilization, if not growth, in certain revenues. The exception is sales tax, due to the decline of DVD rentals by our largest taxpayer. Throughout the past several years of the recession, we have focused on frontline service delivery through outsourcing, restructuring, and even position restoration, as we did mid-year this year for code enforcement. Our biggest challenge, as you will hear with the 5-year forecast ahead, deals with rising CalPERS pension and health care costs. The budget development for this year, for next year I should say, actually started a year ago when in the 5-year forecast that we gave you a year ago that included next year, we projected a $1.4 million shortfall. When we updated that forecast with new information in November, it rose to 1.8 million as a projected shortfall. Then in January, when we actually get into the details of preparing the budget, the gap was projected at 800,000. That mid-year reduction to 800,000 really came from carrying forward prior council direction. The workplace furloughs, for example, for non-sworn and management employees, trying to seek Medicare, CalPERS healthcare reform, savings, and the like. But what we're presenting to you tonight is a balanced budget, actually with about $70,000 in surplus, but it's a balanced proposed budget that you will have presented. I did want to give you a comparison of the budget actions you did last year to this year. And here's a chart that summarizes it. The first column of numbers was your approved budget for the current fiscal year that you approved a year ago that had a $1.8 million gap. The far right column is what we're presenting to you tonight to solve the $800,000 gap. There were updated revenue projections used in the development of both budgets, totaling $500,000. There were expenditure reductions and adjustments a year ago for $1.1 million and this year for $500,000. All of those drawn from the rank order tiering that the council did at the budget study session in January of 2012. There have been some operating increases both years of $300,000, largely related to PERS pension and health care costs. And then a year ago, the council approved the use of one-time funds. It was anticipated excess year-end fund balance, where fiscal year a year ago, we were seeing our revenues were coming in over expenditures, and the council allocated $500,000, $490,000 to be exact, to be used this current fiscal year if need be to balance the budget. However, as we told you at the mid-year budget review, we do not need any of those funds given both expenditure reductions that have occurred during the course of the year through vacancies and position reductions, as well as increased revenues, we are once again not having to touch any of our reserves or fund balance to maintain town service delivery. And for next year, we're not recommending any use of reserves for ongoing service delivery as well. So that shows you just 2 years comparison of how we've closed the gap and what the council has approved. I will now invite Jennifer to go over the actual proposed balanced budget.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Madam Mayor, and members of the council. I'm happy for the very first time to present to you the fiscal year 13-14 proposed operating budget. As you can see, this is an overview of our revenues and expenditures that are being proposed. I'd like to point out that it's a balanced budget, as our manager just stated, and our budget is about $36.4 million. Also, there's excess revenues over expenditures of almost $70,000. So that's good news for the town in going into next year. Before we get into the details of the budget, I'm going to discuss a little bit about our 5-year forecast. The 5-year forecast is really an evolving document that we update quite frequently when we get new information looking in the out years in terms of CalPERS, employer contribution rates, information like that. So every year when we update, or periodically throughout the year, we make certain assumptions. In the updated 5-year forecast that you can find on page 6 of your staff report, it's also referenced on A-5 in the budget binder if you want to follow along with that. We made the assumption that Netflix sales tax revenue is continuing to decline. The good news is it's not as drastic of a drop as it has been in the prior years. That resulted from the change in their business model, but their sales tax revenue is declining. On a positive note, other revenue sources, particularly ones that are economically sensitive, such as business licenses and permits, those revenues are trending upward. So that's a positive sign that our economy is slowly starting to improve, and it gives us some good outlook in the future. However, offsetting that are the rising CalPERS rates for employer contributions. That was a decision that came down recently by the CalPERS board. They made modifications to the rates and the mortality rates. All of that's resulted in significant increases to the town in terms of expenditures. Between 13-14 and fiscal year 19-20, we're forecasting increases of about 62%. So that's quite a bit of increased expenditure that the town's going to be facing. So again, we have some future challenges ahead as a result of this. We have up to $1.1 million in future budget adjustments that will be needed. That's $700,000 gap in fiscal year 14-15 and another $400,000 projected gap in fiscal year 15-16. So in order to close that gap, we're hoping the trend of improved revenues continues, particularly those that are economically sensitive, such as sales tax, business licenses and permits. However, there may be a need for additional cuts, and we may need to use some reserves in the future to close the gap and minimize impact to town services. Now moving on to the 13-14 proposed budget that's in front of you. Perhaps.
Apropos to a discussion we'll be having later. If you push the right arrow, does that move us ahead?
Yeah. Apologize for that. I'm going to talk about each of the departments and some of the staffing changes and proposals that they're bringing forward to address the $800,000 gap that we had to close this year. I'll try to refer to the page numbers in your budget binder if you wanted to follow along that way. We'll start with the Administrative Services Department. That's page D21 in your budget binder. This, for administrative services, relatively remains stable in terms of FTEs, full-time equivalents for employees. There are some specific changes to outline the director position. The CSD director was reduced to a deputy town manager during this fiscal year. That has been vacated and reclassified to an assistant to the town manager. Also, our half-time economic vitality manager position, or full-time, I apologize, economic vitality manager position has been reduced to a half-time economic vitality coordinator position. And then finally, in the finance department, the assistant finance director position was vacated this year as well and reduced to a finance and budget manager position. So these reclassifications have contributed to savings in salary and personnel costs for the town. Moving on to the Community Development Division, it's on page D77. Community development proposed increases in revenues that are really being reflected and we're seeing happen in this fiscal year. We're proposing to stay on the track that we see that we're forecasting to end this fiscal year at. So it's really a increase from what was budgeted for 12-13. Of course, along with those increased revenues come some additional staffing costs in terms of meeting the demands for increased activities. So there's a proposed in the budget is an increase of about 2,500 temporary staff hours to meet those increased service levels. The Parks and Public Works Department on page D-157. Again, there's about a net effect of a half-time position increase in this department. The Parks and Facilities Superintendent position has been reclassified to a Facilities and Environmental Manager position. And in addition, the half-time Building Inspector position has been restored to a full-time Engineering Inspector position. This position is really going to be used to monitor stormwater compliance issues and inspections related to the increase in private development construction projects. Again, that's a net effect of a half-time additional FTE in the department budget, and that's resulting from increased revenues from the West Valley Solid Waste Management Authority administrative fees. Moving on to the library, on D-233, the library is proposing quite a comprehensive reorganization, which is really designed to enhance and improve customer service. What this means in terms of staffing is a reduction of about 5,000 hours in temporary employee hours, and that's replaced with almost 2 full-time permanent employees, and that'll help with consistency in training and providing more frontline services over at the library. For police on D-111 of your binder, this is really closing prior year approved budget reduction. The sergeant retired during mid-year this year. We knew of the retirement. That position was only budgeted for a half year, so this is just eliminating that half year that was budgeted. And the assignments for that sergeant have already been reassigned to date. And then finally, townwide, we're proposing to continue with the unpaid furloughs except for sworn police staff. This is a 5-day furlough program that we implement during the annual town closure in order to minimize the effect to the residents. It's about a 1.8% salary savings to the town, or about $219,000. And that concludes my presentation. I'll turn it over to Mr. Larson.
Because of a number of questions that came from council and because it's important to showing the fiscal health of the town, we did want to talk briefly about reserves. And this is drawn from the proposed budget in the financial summaries, pages C25 to C29. This shows you the designated reserves of the town that total $19 million as estimated at the end of next fiscal year. The first 2 lines include the budget stabilization reserve and the catastrophic reserve, which by council policy are to remain at 12.5% unless needed as determined by council. For next year, we estimate that 12.5% to be $4.2 million. You'll see that we're showing the catastrophic reserve at that level of 4.2 million, while the budget stabilization reserve remains at 6.7 million, which is $2.5 million higher than required by council policy. The third line, capital special projects, is the future funding of the 5-year CIP. Whenever we present the 5-year CIP, we typically like to provide the funding in advance, having drawn on prior year fund balance. The next several lines, starting with unallocated reserves through year-end savings, budget amendments, open space reserve, retiree medical, and then skipping Vasona land sale and including special studies, that totals 1.9 million that is available for future allocation, and some of those funds are what we'll be bringing back to you in future capital discussions to look at meeting the capital priorities that the council established at your January session. A few of these warrant pulling out special reference. The year-end savings budget amendment line, that's 500,000. That really reflects the 490,000 the council approved a year ago that was set aside as a designated reserve to meet a gap that we thought might happen this current fiscal year, but that we've successfully avoided, as I previously spoke to you about. The open space reserve has existed for quite a while, and is one that we are thinking might be a possible source for any local matching grants we need for bridges or pedestrian creek trail connections as those projects are considered in the future. The last one is that I wanted to talk about was the Vasona land sale, and that will be transferred to the GFAR capital. It's really the remainder of the $6 million we received from the county that we've used for acquisition and development of the new Creekside Sports Park, and this 1.7 is the final source of funds to be reserved to GFAR, to the capital budget, basically, to pay for the completion of the Creekside Sports Park project. So that summarizes the designated reserves that the town has, and I did just want to reiterate that every year since the start of the Great Recession, the town has added to its reserves. We have not yet to date ever drawn on our reserves for ongoing operations, and that's a testament to the fiscal strength of the town that during the greatest recession since the Great Depression, we've been able to continue adding to our reserves. In terms of council direction, we're looking to you for tonight, besides what was presented in the budget, is first, there are 2 items that are clarifications of what's in the budget. In the Human Services grant, as detailed in the staff report, we have a correction on page 8 of the staff report where it was not listed in the budget itself on page D34 that the Community Services Commission was recommending $13,000 for Live Oak Adult Day Services and $3,000 to West Valley Community Services for continued food service support for Los Gatos residents in need. So we are recommending the council approve that correction as detailed in the staff report. And then under Art and Education grants, the Arts and Culture Commission, again, this is on page 9 of the staff report and page D34 of the budget itself. The Arts and Culture Commission is continuing to recommend funding of art grant recipients with some modifications as you've seen presented. But due to ongoing discussions with the museums of Los Gatos and them taking over operations of the old library space, except for the children's room, the prior 12K grant that was provided to the museums will no longer be provided, and staff was previously recommending in the budget that $8,000 be made available to the Arts and Culture Commission as they requested for fulfillment of the arts plan that the council has previously adopted, and the Arts and Culture Commission and staff are now recommending that the full 12K grant that used to be provided to the museums be provided to the Arts and Culture Commission for future grant making and fulfillment of the arts plan as approved by council. In total, the town continues to provide $120,000 for key partner non-service providers, $20,000 in the arts realm and $100,000 in human services, youth services, and services for victims of domestic violence. And we have maintained this level of funding throughout the Great Recession, which I think is another testament to the town's strength in recognizing the value of the nonprofit partners that we work with. Last, we have a number of potential one-time funding opportunities for council's consideration, and our recommendation would be that this $85,000 in one-time funding be drawn from that reserve I previously explained, the $490,000 that the council set aside last year for this year that we've not had to touch, that we use $85,000 of that to meet what we think are three critical needs. First, as described on page 7 of the staff report, the library and the police department are jointly recommending piloting a new police resource community officer intern to deal with teen services and safety and security in the library. Imagine this as a school resource officer, but for the library. And it's a joint recommendation from library and police for 1 year at a cost of $30,000 to see if it is able to achieve what we hope is a proactive, positive engagement with the patrons of the library to ensure responsible, respectful use of the facilities. Second, as previously presented to council for both of these items at a study session a few months ago, we're trying to put all our conditional use permits online. We're about 75% done with the scanning part of that work, but we have the hard work ahead in two particular areas. Going through multiple files to find the historical documents, which haven't been easy to pull up, and second, coming up with the best way to make those CUPs accessible to the public, either by property common name, parcel number, address, geographic location. There's a technology piece to that, and we feel that work will require $30,000 of one-time funding. Similarly, we have the online development activity system that was previously presented to council. We believe we have about $25,000 of one-time work needed with that to pull up a system, probably not quite to the level of Cupertino, which several of you spoke positively about, but to move us in that direction of having an easily accessible online development activity system during the course of this next year. We had a number of other budget issues that were raised in the staff report with no changes needed at this time, but just wanting to alert you to them. On page 9 of the staff report, we did update you on the code compliance program that you added at mid-year, which we are continuing and making progress there. And while the overwhelming majority of our cases are resolved within 7 days, there is still a large nugget of tough ones that usually come to the council's attention that can go on for weeks or months and take an inordinate amount of time. We are hoping to come back to you possibly as early as mid-year with the next generation of how we hope to upgrade our code compliance program after 1 year of operation. Second issue is ABAG membership. There's been public discussion and some council questions about our membership in ABAG. It's a $6,000 cost to the town. Not being a member of ABAG would not change their role in terms of setting our RENA targets. It would just change our role as a member of ABAG. The next issue is one we have raised in every budget since I've been with the town, and it's the non-point source discharge elimination system. NPDES is the acronym. Stormwater is what most people know it as. Sewer systems have tight controls to regulate the pollutants and emissions that can occur into our water systems. Stormwater is the next target with a Bay Area-wide permit. that we anticipate will have increasing regulatory requirements and financial obligations on the town. Per the mayor's request, we are preparing for a study session with the council in early 2014 to discuss the NPDES and what the ramifications are for the future. Similarly, we have mentioned in several budgets the Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability Project, which is, at its simplest vision, to get all public safety communications, emergency medical, fire, and police, cross-jurisdictionally able to communicate in case of the big one or even a small one where we need to call on regional resources. It is our plan to bring forward to council in late 2013 a study session on what our costs are for the future and what the regional authority is looking at long term. 2 years ago, the councils of both Los Gatos and Campbell endorsed consideration of consolidation of those two dispatch systems. That study is now complete, and both the police departments of both jurisdictions as well as the managers of both jurisdictions have come to the conclusion that the upfront costs are not worth the long-term relatively small benefits that might accrue from simply a two-jurisdiction consolidation. Instead, what the town has already pursued is with acquisition of our new dispatch software with Sunnyvale, we were able to piggyback basically on their volume discount to get our dispatch system for a cheaper cost with ongoing upgrades as part of that. Plus, we now have the redundant capabilities. Should this building become unusable for whatever event or occurrence, we could literally flip all our dispatch calls to Sunnyvale for a short period of time if need be during an emergency. Even more significant, there is multiple discussions going on about dispatch consolidation in the valley, where I think we could end up with 3 sub-regional dispatch systems, which for a jurisdiction like Los Gatos would give us multiple choices of who to go to for services in the future. But that's really tied to the Regional Interoperability Project, so I think we'll see that come to fruition over the next 5 years. Next in the staff report on page 11, as well as on page D 133 of the budget itself, we raised some emerging issues that emerged late in the budget development process about police equipment needs, as well as some staffing needs that are emerging in the police department, particularly related to some long-term disabilities and absences, as well as a high turnover. The end result of these discussions to come back to you in the first quarter would be to look at possible allocation of ending fund balance from this year to maybe restore the hire ahead officer position that the council had previously approved prior to the Great Recession. Redevelopment dissolution status. The good news here is we're coming to the end of the elimination of redevelopment. It has been incredibly time demand, particularly in finance in the manager's office for the last 2 years, but there's some other good news. We've been able to provide over $3 million to both the Los Gatos Union School District serving K through 8 students, as well as the Los Gatos Saratoga Union High School District serving Los Gatos High School, as well as $2 million to County Fire, which provides services to our town, as well as $1 million to the West Valley Community College District, as well as returning or protecting $3 million for the town. And we take our victories as we could after the state eliminated redevelopment, and we're pleased with how well this has turned out through hard work by our oversight board and our finance and manager's office staff. Last, and not reflected on the slide, but I did want to highlight that we also provided our annual donation opportunities listing as attachment 5 to the staff report and discussed on page 12 of the staff report. Strategic goals. This is discussed on page 12 of the staff report and included as attachment 3. The council will recall at your mid-year budget review You reviewed both the prior strategic goals as well as a work plan staff had developed for this calendar year, and you provide direction in 3 places. Combine the work plan and strategic goals. Second, eliminate items that have been completed or on the verge of completion. And third, to get specific so that the items on the strategic goals list can be checked off, so to speak, at future council meetings. I'm not going to walk through all of these, but I'm going to give you an example of each from the first column. It used to say in the first box under the green, I don't have a, yes I do. So in this box, it used to just say, implement general plan action priorities. That's not something you could check off. It's a continuous work product. So staff reviewed the current general plan action priorities and chose the one that we thought was most urgent for this 2-year cycle, and that's to both revise the grading policy and adopt the new general grading ordinance. A second example that's drawn from the work plan is the second box in that same column, which is the regulation of single-use bags, polystyrene, and leaf blowers, which were items that used not to be on those strategic goals, but were on the work plan. And as we've blended those documents together, you'll now see them here. And the third example is where we've eliminated one, which was adopt a sustainability plan. The council did that last year. It no longer needed to remain on the strategic goal as a future priority. So that gives you an example in each case of how we've tried to follow the council's direction. And with your budget action tonight, we would ask for approval of this modified strategic goals matrix, which is important for receipt of the budget award that was received earlier tonight for the current year. We're now going to move to the CIP presentation with Mr. Todd Capursa.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. It is now my pleasure to be presenting the proposed capital improvement plan for the period 2013 through 2018. In past years, prior to developing a draft CIP, staff has reviewed all of the current and proposed projects and then take stock of the available resources and project schedules. However, this year we did it a little bit differently. We brought to council a list of about 40 potential projects for feedback and direction during a study session back in January. Based on that direction, staff then matched the project priorities with the available resources in order to develop a draft capital improvement program. This draft was subsequently presented to the Planning Commission for review and was forwarded to the council with a recommendation for approval. While the proposed 5-year CIP is over $24 million, almost half of that occurs in the first budget year, fiscal year 13-14. Much of this, however, is carry-forward projects, but it should be noted that there is additional $5 million recommended for investment in additional projects. We would like to now highlight a few projects by program as well. For street projects, the Almond Grove will be our most prominent project with a proposed $4 million of investment in the reconstruction of these streets over the next 2 years. With the first year of that being focused on community input and design, with the second year with construction being proposed for the second year, fiscal year 14-15. The long-awaited improvements at the intersection of University and Highway 9 will also increase safety as well as traffic flow at that area as well. Installation of additional dedicated turn lanes at the intersection of Winchester and Knowles will improve traffic flow at this location as well. In the parks area, this will be highlighted by the continued improvement of Blossom Hill Park that will not only make the park more valuable as a neighborhood park, but will recognize its importance as a pedestrian and bicycle route that connects the adjacent neighborhood with the local elementary school. And our local open spaces, Hines and Santa Rosa, as wonderful as they are in need of access improvements and retaining wall replacements, which are being proposed in this program as well. And lastly, in the facilities program, we will renovate the former library space with the goal of making the space available to the museums of Los Gatos and the Friends of the Library. And with that, I will hand it back over to Mr. Larson.
And we're about done. We have already answered 30 questions, over 30 questions that have come from every member of council submitted questions, and we provided those in the addendum last Friday and in the desk item. So following public comments, which probably won't be expensive, and I'll have time for council discussion and questions as you then move forward to action in terms of considering the operating budget, the CIP, and direction on the specific issues raised. And we will take your action tonight to make modifications to the budget as required, to then bring that forward back to you on either June 3rd or June 17th as a consent calendar item for your formal approval. So this is really where we receive your direction for any changes you want to the budget. That concludes staff report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And at this point, I would normally have council questions of staff before public input, but because we only have one card and one anticipated speaker, I would call for Georgia Havelka. You have 3 minutes to present to us, Mr. Havelka. And while he's coming up here, I will point out to staff, I will be looking from staff for not only generalized recommended actions such as those, but in some form, maybe verbally, every specific question you want us to answer. Mr. Havelka.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff. As Chair of the Arts and Culture Commission, we are really pleased to support our little part of the staff's recommendation in the budget. As you know, we're in the second year of the Forbes Mill Bridge Art Project. We're just now receiving exciting new entries for the catwalk downtown, which we hope to have up and running perhaps by fall. Plus, we're working with staff and council, have worked together to do a pilot project on the banners, which we hope to, put some teeth into and present back to you here in the fall. And we have lots of other ideas as well. And the staff has worked very hard to give us the resources that we need to fulfill our arts projects, and we hope that you can support that. Christina Gilmore has worked really well to put this all together for us, and with Greg, and we hope that you can support it. Thank you very much.
Questions of the speaker? Seeing none, I understand we have one more speaker. Sujata, West Valley Community Service.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council Member. My name is Sujata Venkatraman. I'm the Director at West Valley Community Services. Just wanted to say thank you for supporting the services that we offer to Los Gatos residents. We have been in Los Gatos for a long time, and you might have heard that we were in partnership with Calvary providing the food services. The current funding that we have asked for is more comprehensive emergency assistance, and food is a part of that service, and we are continuing to offer that using our mobile pantry. We've also established a new relationship with the Los Gatos Presbyterian Church and strengthened our relationship with St. Luke's Church and would be present in Los Gatos. We provide comprehensive case management, and that is a service that a lot of residents are accessing from Los Gatos. So I just wanted to let you know that we may not be at our current location, which is Calvary. We are still in Los Gatos providing services. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of Sujata? No, thank you very much. I have no other cards. I see no one else in the audience, so I will close the public input part of our hearing. I'm going to start, ask council, I imagine we have questions, we have comments, we have motions. Let's start with questions of staff if there are any. Does anybody have questions of staff? Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wonder if the manager could give us a quick review of the changes in process that CalPERS is engaging in this year. I heard a presentation at League of Cities in which the chair of the board of CalPERS indicated to the members of the board of the league how this was going to affect the member cities. And there was a good deal of consternation, shall we say, in that this smoothing process is going to be different at the front end, supposedly have a long-term benefit, but at the front end a short-term hit. And it seems very nebulous at this point. I know you discussed it in the report, but if you could expand on that discussion.
Thank you, Councilman. Yes, the CalPERS has been going through a number of changes. The action they've taken already is to modify both the smoothing period and the amortization period. So the smoothing period has gone from a 15-year rolling to a 5-year direct. What that really means is instead of taking increases or decreases and rolling them in over a long period of time, they're going to be rolled in over a shorter period of time, 5 years, and it'll be a direct. So benefits and detriments of CalPERS investment actions and financial needs will be realized by local jurisdictions as well as the state more quickly. They're moving to what is believed by many financial advisors to be a more standard and appropriate process rather than rolling it out so long. In terms of the amortization, it's a similar change, but instead of being a 30-year rolling amortization, it would be a 30-year fixed amortization. Those are the changes that they have done already that have led to projected significant rate increases for jurisdictions across the state starting 2015, 2016. And we've included those increases in our 5-year forecast. In addition, there's 2 other changes that are being talked about at CalPERS that we think may be enacted over the next 6 months. One would be the discount rate that has been previously discussed, which I believe they're currently using 7.5 or 7.75. 7.5, and the question is, should that be dropped to 7.25 or 7.0? That's kind of their anticipated rate of investment return over a long period of time. That would, dropping that discount rate reduces the income they're banking on from their investment portfolio, which would then translate to higher costs by the local jurisdictions. The one other change they're looking mortality rates. This is good news for the recipients, bad news for CalPERS, but they're reassessing the mortality rates that should be used for retirees over the next 30-year period, and recognizing that while we in general are living longer, that affects the actuarial results that are used to set CalPERS rates. So we've made assumptions to the negative on all 4 in terms of the 5-year forecast, even though CalPERS has only acted on the first 2. It could be worse, it could be better, but we've tried to project out in the 5-year forecast what we think is a conservative/negative impact to our CalPERS rates.
Right. If I could then continue.
Mr. Brzezinski.
That was my concern, because it seems like there are a number of issues that have been determined, and yet they remain very nebulous or very vague in terms of what the actual impact will be. And so my concern is, as we go forward, whether we have built in the proper safeguards so that we can actually accomplish what may happen in any case. That would be the issue that I would be most concerned about.
At mid-year, we had told you that we thought we possibly had 1 more year of budget reductions needed or budget adjustments as we've just gone through for the year after next. As presented by Ms. Callaway, the 5-year forecast shows there's another year beyond that, with the total adjustments coming to $1.1 million. The bulk of that is due to CalPERS rate changes.
Other questions? All right, if no one has questions, I'll ask questions. With regard to your report on the $1.7 million from Vasona from the Vasona Fund, I'll call it. Is that money going to be used, anticipated being used for the sports park or for some other thing?
The transfer, let me start over. When the council approved the sale of the 13 acres in Vasona County, the county's Lake Vasona County Park, to the county, that $6 million staff was directed to set aside in a reserve that could only be used for sports park facilities. That's this line in the designated reserves, where it was $6 million at the time of the sale. We then acquired the property. We went through design and some pre-construction work that brought that down to 1.7. This 1.7, roughly 1.2 or 3 of it, 3 or 4, is what has already been spent for completion of the sports park, but the GFAR, the general fund, I can't remember the acronym, it's our capital budget. We spend out of there and then we replenish it with the money from the reserve. And so that final replenishment of the final construction costs has not occurred. So we've borrowed from future capital projects because that's our checking account. It's probably the best way to describe it, to actually pay the contractor. But we now need to move 1.3 to 4 million over to replenish the capital checking account. And then that leaves you the 300 to 400,000 that is in reserve for a potential future bridge project or other trail improvements and connections related to the sports park.
Thank you. That last part actually anticipated my next question. The Twin Oaks, I had asked you about this, the Twin Oaks plan development, and you did answer it, but is that a plan development that has already been approved or is coming through staff to the Planning Commission and Council?
It is in
I'll let
process.
Sandy Bailey answer the question.
That application is in process, but there's no anticipated dates for hearings.
Right, thank you. And then this is the question that the manager verbalized anticipation, and that's the, I'm going to call it better screening or equipment for the council chambers. Some of the issues, well, I'll have staff explain what the money's for, but some of the issues that I've seen are this screen is sometimes very difficult for those of us on the dais, and I would imagine in the audience, to see. Does this expenditure address that issue? I believe that that screen is also difficult to see online, and it may be for the same reasons it's difficult for us to see it. And the other couple of issues is I've observed an increased use of audiovisual when we have speakers, and what, if anything, will be done by this expenditure for that issue, because what I see are increasing challenges to the use of all of our audience's audiovisual.
Yes, I will refer the council to page 6 of today's desk item, and it's regarding the public facilities capital project that's in the capital budget under pages E26 and 27. What we've included in that project is the improvements to the technology really in the back room for the KCAT broadcast of these council meetings. That does not include specific changes to what I call the audience experience here in the council chambers. However, we do have a number of improvements underway. First, we are changing the template that has been used for 5.5 years for council presentations. We have moved to darker print, but we're going to change the background as well and just get a updated template that is already in process and will be used no later than your first meeting in August. Second, both on this side of the dais with the clicker and the laser, and on the other side of the dais with changing staff, just trying to simplify the transitions from the overhead projector to the computer projector and back. And then the third question, we think maybe a better one that's addressed by the policy committee, is what should be our standard for audience use of the presentation technology. Overhead projectors are very common and have been for a long time for audience use in public meetings. However, having somebody walk up with a thumb drive to put into a laptop connected to the town network has security concerns. We never know what might flash up on the screen and its appropriateness for a televised public meeting, given the standards TV operates and the like. So we do think some policy direction from most likely the policy committee to the council may be appropriate for audience use of presentation technology.
In that regard, I understand that you are able to see an applicant's documentation prior to presentation, and I can understand, the computer challenge that you're talking about. But if a community member brings up a piece of paper, do we assume that that piece of paper we can just see it, or is there some issue there?
Our assumption is that any piece of paper that is handed to the clerk to show up on the screen, they're expecting us to not do quality control on the piece of paper, but just to show it up on the screen. So we have no control over the size of type or font or size of the document that's being presented to you.
Or the substance.
Or the substance. Related to that is a concern that while for applicants, or even if the Arts and Culture Commission chair had told us he wanted to make a presentation, he probably would have communicated with us in advance. We would have had a chance to receive the file and check it and put it on a laptop for the presentation, and it would have been less of a time lag. But as we've seen in the last few months, somebody shows up with a presentation that we don't know is coming. We have to fumble with the thumb drive, find the file, move it over, find the right program to open it up, get it so it's working. And if we were counting that against the speaker's 3 minutes, they might have a minute left. And so there's things there we just need to work out and decide what does the council want.
All right, and you also had a survey that you were requesting be done. What is the cost of that?
If we did proceed with the survey, we would propose to partner with the International City Managers Association in their National Citizens Survey, which would keep the cost down to approximately $13,000 to $15,000.
So any more questions? Because after this, I'm going to go into comments and/or motion. I see no further questions. Then we'll segue to the council for a motion or comments. Ms. Jensen.
Just a process question. On our staff report, there are items that are identified as staff wants us to discuss. Are we going to do that in some fashion, or you can have a motion on the entire budget?
I'm asked staff to tee us up for what motions they want, but in simple answer to your question is this is the opportunity now to discuss anything, any item. Ms. Jensen.
Okay, so my comment is on the proposal. We were invited to give input on the community resource officer intern police for the library. And I, for one, don't think a police response is the right response to teenagers in the library. And I hope that there can be a solution that is not a police response. So I would not be in favor of developing such a program.
Mr. Larson, are you able to respond by identifying what staff means by a police response?
I could certainly provide an overview, but I'd like to ask Library Manager Heidi Long, Town Librarian Heidi Long, to provide a response.
This program is based off of a very successful Mountain View program wherein they use community resource officers as a very positive presence in the library. So our hope would be that this would be someone that the teenagers would relate to, someone that was a very positive influence in their life and helped prevent problems so that we didn't get to the point where we had to react to problems.
Ms. Jensen?
So would this be like a school resource officer at the high school who ends up being essentially a police officer who may be positive, may be negative? I'm just concerned that we've had obviously a great response by teenagers to come to the library. We have that outlined in our report, which I think is a good thing. I would not want to see that discouraged by those teenagers thinking that if they stepped out of line, suddenly they would have a police problem.
Currently, we have Officer Leighton Howard, who is our school resource officer, who will come over, and the teenagers respond to him with such a warm welcome. We had a line of them, probably 25 kids, waiting to get the little junior officer badges from him. They really have what our police officers do, and the way they train is a very positive, customer-focused interaction. Every interaction that we have ended up needing police support has ended up very, very positive. Some of those kids are now our favorite library users. They're wonderful. So it's really provided a very positive, strong connection and partnership for those teenagers.
I might also add, it's also for both financial as well as operational reasons, as raised by the council, that we thought it was best as an intern rather than a automatic ongoing program, or a pilot, excuse me, that we try it as a pilot year to see if it is able to have the right characteristics that we think is appropriate for the library.
And how long is the pilot? I'm sorry.
1 year.
And also, when this individual is in the library, is the individual dressed as an officer in uniform?
Captain D'Antonio will respond to that question. And it's not a police officer, it's a community
I'm sorry,
resource
yes.
officer.
The CSO, the community service officer, is going to be similar to the community service officers that we have employed now. They don't actually have police powers. What they are is they supplement the police officers in regards to being aware of possible crimes in progress. They also are, in general, they're younger employees. Some of the employees that we have now, actually volunteers we have now in our Explorer program, have expressed interest in an opportunity like this to be able to interact with other teens and youth in the community, and again, to be that positive influence, number one. And number two is to really to be just another set of eyes for us. They are in uniform. They're a light blue uniform. They're trained by police officers. In addition, they have radio capabilities, so they could be in contact with our dispatch if necessary to request an actual officer to respond.
Thank you. Further questions on this issue? Ms. McNutt.
Thank you, Mayor. Could you tell me what the peak hours are? And one of the thoughts, and I don't really have a concern about this, I find it, kind of intriguing to see if it works, but if you had a staff person, an additional library staff person, then when the library is not in high use, then they could be doing other things. So if there's not anything for a community service officer to be friendly with, or a situation to be solving, can they shelve books? Will they be doing something useful? And again, what are the peak hours that you're talking about?
The peak hours would be 2 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and the other 4 hours of that officer's 19 hours would be spent with the police department, training and working with Officer Leighton Howard as the school resource officer. So I can't imagine during that 2 to 5 period where we are swamped that we would need to have them shelving books. And what this position would really provide for us is a skill set that our library staff members don't have. So it's this ability to interact, and I think we all do it really well in a positive way, but they interact in a positive, authoritative way that really helps set the stage and define boundaries.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Since we're on the topic of the school resource officer, I remember a couple of years ago in our budget, we reduced that to a half-time position. Is that still the case, or has that been restored to a full-time position?
I want to make sure we give the correct answer, so let's I am going to page D116 of the budget, where the community service officers has remained a funded position of 4. We may have had a vacancy for a 6-month window. Do either of the captains have more information on that?
Yes, I believe in the budget it's actually hours. What we have in the past is had 2 part-time community service officers. And it's really, the way I understand it, is based on an hourly. The budget shows hours, and if somebody can take a quick look, I think it was approximately 2,000 hours that it's budgeted for.
So again, referencing page D116 of the budget, we do have 4 community services officers that are full-time funded positions, and then we have community service officer interns for 1 FTE equivalent, which would be 2 half-time positions as reflected by the captain. I actually think the listing of a potential reduction in community services officers was linked to the council's budget prioritization matrix, where those were one of the options we've given you. I know I view them high bang for the buck because they're so much less expensive than officers, and while they don't have the full authority and skill set as officers, they are able to reduce workload. The one I'm thinking of is when we moved the court liaison positions to a contracted service to Campbell. Wasn't that a CSO we moved off, or was that a police assistant?
The question was about the SRO Leighton Howard's position.
Oh, excuse me, was your question about the school resource?
Yeah, I was going to bring you back to that. This is the SRO.
I was doing a great answer for the wrong question. The school resource officer, we lost funding from the Los Gatos Union School District for a portion of 1 year, but they have since gone back into funding of that position. So our splitting, I believe the 2 school districts together provide $80,000 of the funding for that officer position, and we provide services to the schools. That position has not been reduced at this point in time, and in fact, in a recent meeting police had with the school districts, they're particularly pleased with the staffing and support, and there could be discussion with the school boards in the future of future enhancements to that program.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, so is it full-time?
It's a full-time position. Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski.
I just want to reinforce something that was said. Officer Leighton Howard, Officer Sam Wanell have both been really positive school resource officers. My experience with the high school kids or the kids in the elementary and middle school has always been, these folks have just been great communicators, in some ways great role models, and not in any way, shape, or form a negative presence on campus. In fact, I think we should acknowledge the fact that when we had that vandalism, graffiti taking place down on the Los Gatos Creek Trail, very, very destructive and ongoing graffiti that was quite offensive to the community. I think it was through the interactions of Officer Leighton Howard with some of the kids in the school community that brought that to a successful close, and we were able to arrest the perpetrator on this one. So I would not want us to think that the police officer on campus is in any way, shape, or form, at least in this community, a negative presence. And I applaud the fact that the school district has been able to return to a funding mechanism that allows this to happen, and I think our youth are much benefited by the fact that we have the personnel that we have there on site. I'm interested to hear how this experiment will work with the community service officer intern, because as an old school person, I know that you do need an adult presence, and you do need someone who is there, who is going to be able to reinforce appropriate parameters and at the same time relate to the kids. And it sounds like the method that you are proposing has that potential. I'm certainly interested in seeing how this works out in the course of time, because I know we'll get a report back on how successful this program is.
Staff, or Mr. Larson, that raises an issue for me, and listening to Ms. Jensen and Mr. Brzezinski. When would you anticipate this new program being reported back to us? Are you thinking that we're going to go a full year and wait till the next budget? That it would be a report back in 6 months? What are your thoughts?
I would recommend we report back at 2 points in time. One would be at the mid-year budget review, where we will have had probably 5 to 6 months of operation of the position, assuming it takes a month to get it up. And then we'd come back to you with the recommendation with the budget next May on whether or not to continue the pilot. And that would be the decisive act by the council, whether to normalize the program or to let it go.
All right, thank you. Other questions or input? All right, well, back to me. And I've shared this with staff, and it was reflected in part on in the desk item. And that was the survey that staff has placed into the budget. And the concern I have with surveys in general is that I think they are very difficult to do correctly. Anybody can do a survey. To do a survey that has validity is very difficult to do. This one would take staff time to some extent, and staff time is money. And I didn't know what the cost was, the $13,000 to $15,000 I just found out. Sounds like a significant amount of money to me in our budget. So if this budget goes forward and if it is approved, I will be making a negative no vote for the survey portion of it. Further discussion. Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to reinforce the mayor's position on this one. Not that we don't want to find out what is current information within our constituencies regarding service delivery and their satisfaction. I know when we did it previously, it was in relationship to a couple of specific items we were looking for particularly. A lot of it related to youth services at that time. I guess as I see this lineup of demands in the next several months and into the next several years, actually, I think that we're going to have to be very cautious about those things we commit to that may be elective in nature, and focus on those things that seem more appropriately defined as essential services. There's a survey that's going to have to take place that I think is going to be very complex, and that is with the Almond Grove neighborhood, and what the expectation is for the rehabilitation of the sidewalks, curbs, and streets in that neighborhood. It's going to be complicated. I think it's essential because we need to get to the Almond Grove. That, I think, is something that I can definitely support, but I think we do have to be cautious about staff capacity. And in this particular case, it may not be called out at this time. Maybe in a couple of years, when we've got a few of our projects behind us, that might be the time to do it. But right now, it seems not essential. And that would be my recommendation as we look at all these projects that are ahead of us, that we be very cautious about those things that although they may be interesting to engage in, they may not be what we want to engage in at this point in time, and that would be one of them.
Right. And I will agree with Mr. Brzezinski, who was agreeing with me. But he used a term about elective, using staff time and also funding for elective items. I mean, we know that we have our agendas already filled. They were filled in January for the entire year 2013. And it is a struggle for us to use our staff time and our council time. So for the reasons I stated and jumping on to what Mr. Brzezinski said, this will be something I will be voting against. So, Having said that, I'm going to turn to staff, because I don't see anybody else on the dais asking questions or making comments. I would ask you, Mr. Larson, to tell us what are the motions that you are looking for. I see a couple of them up there.
I would, to simplify this, I would think that the omnibus motion would be direct presentation of the final budget and capital improvement program to the council for final action with the following additions and changes. And I would recommend the council vote on the changes and additions individually, and that will then you do a vote on the whole motion.
All right, so the wording you're suggesting just starts the motion?
Correct.
And now we start doing individual items?
Correct.
And we have these individual items and maybe their funding amount listed where?
In the staff report, and I was going to present them orally as we walk through them.
If you would, please.
So first, that's not shown on the slide, would be to direct staff to include the corrections regarding the missing human service grants as recommended by the Community Services Commission. That was the two grants, one for West Valley Community Services and the other for Live Oak Adult Daycare Services.
All right, and I'm anticipating that we will do each of these individually. May I have a motion?
I move the staff recommendation and the process that we're engaged in right now for approval.
Have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, Mr. Brzezinski, second, Ms. McNutt. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Second would be allocation of the full remaining $12,000 of art grant funds to the Arts and Culture Commission for fulfillment of the arts plan.
Do I have a motion? Ms. Jensen?
I'd make a motion as indicated by Mr. Larson, and I'm just wondering, maybe just for the record and for ease of reference, if you would refer us back to the page number where we can find that in our staff report.
You bet.
So we can make sure. I think it was on page 9.
I can tell you exactly, it was page 9.
Okay,
And the
so
prior
as
one was
indicated
page
in page 9 of our staff report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Jensen, seconded by Ms. McNutt.
Could I make a
Discussion?
comment?
Mr. Brzezinski.
Yeah, I want to appreciate the presentation regarding the Arts Commission's recommendation. And just as a comment, I believe the Arts Commission is now demonstrating a clear contribution to the community in the projects that have been engaged with at this point and the ones that are projected. I notice an enthusiasm and a level of professionalism, I think, that is a step above what we in some ways have experienced in the past. There were a couple of us, including the mayor, who were present at the ribbon cutting on the bridge, and it turned out to be at this first phase a really exciting project, and look forward to the next iteration of this as we go forward. So, and just commendations to the Arts Commission on the council's behalf.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. Larson?
Yes. One-time funding from the council's prior designated reserve, and we can probably do these individually. The police.
And you're looking at what page?
Page 7 of the staff report. $30,000 for the library police resource intern.
I'll move that.
Okay, Mr. Brzezinski, I have a second. Ms. McNutt?
Second.
Discussion? Ms. Jensen?
Thank you for your answers regarding the program. I will support it, but will be very interested in the 6-month report on how it's going.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Then the CUP tracking and online development activity system, I believe from what I've heard, those can be handled together as one motion. They're on pages 7 and 8. It would be $55,000 total for the two efforts.
May I have a motion? Ms. McNutt?
I'll move the staff recommendation on those two items.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Next is a approval of the 2013-15 strategic goals. It was attachment 3 to the staff report and previously presented on the screen.
You have a motion? Ms. McNutt?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember McNutt, second by Mr. Brzezinski. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
And last is we've had 2 members speak regarding whether or not the survey should be included in the budget for next year, and look for council action on that.
Ms. Jensen?
I would move to delete the proposal for a survey out of this year's budget, per the discussions by the mayor and Mr. Brzezinski.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Jensen, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
And then with a final motion to approve the direction with the changes just noted by council, that would encompass the referrals we'll be bringing back to you at first quarter, end of 2013 and 2014, as well as all the other work that the budget reflects.
Here's a nice specific motion.
So the motion is to direct presentation of the final proposed operating budget and CIP as per the direction of council tonight.
And it'll be presented to us at one of our meetings in June?
I believe we can make the June 3rd meeting,
All right, but we'll say one of the meetings in June?
one of the June meetings.
Do you need a specific date?
No.
All right. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Brzezinski, have a second?
Second.
Ms. McNutt, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Madam Mayor, before we adjourn, I wanted to thank you for, once again, your detailed attention as we saw through all the questions you asked on the budget, and just to have such a focus on the budget gives strength to how important it is to setting the organization's goals and priorities. I also wanted to single out in finance Steve Conway, who's not here tonight, Jennifer Callaway, Gita Angvari, Gail, and Kristen, and other finance staff who've worked in the preparation of the budget. Also on the budget team, Pamela Jacobs and Rumi Portillo, as well as the work of all the directors and staff, including Tim Kawasaki from Public Works, who's here tonight, and our police captains and all the other directors. On the CIP, Director Todd Capurso, Town Engineer Kevin Rohani, Linda Isherwood, and Parks and Public Works staff. Just wanted to single out and acknowledge them and thank them for their hard work.
I believe, Madam Mayor, this is at the Academy Awards when the music starts to come up, I believe.
And I'm done.
And I'll make it a lot faster, but that's not unusual. I want to thank the council for their demonstrated work and as reflected in the questions, and thank staff for all of its work. And at this point, the meeting is adjourned.